SOP 260. I said podcasting would change the world, and I'm going to tell you how podcasting has changed my world, and I've got a cool new way to listen to podcasts.
It's the School of Podcasting's morning announcements. Here's Dave Jackson.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back. I am your personal podcast coach, Dave Jackson, welcoming you to the School of Podcasting's morning announcements. This is where we talk about all things podcasting, from planning to producing to promoting and all points in between. If you'd like to know more about us, check us out at schoolofpodcasting.com. If you'd like to talk to me, I'd love to hear from you. Our favorite way to have you contact me is by voicemail, courtesy of podcastvoicemail.com. Just go to 888-563-3228. You can also email me, dave@schoolofpodcasting.com, or leave a comment like Sally did out in our show notes. Just go to shownotes.schoolofpodcasting.com. Well, let's just jump into it. We are talking about different ways to listen to a podcast. I found a new trick, but in our last show called Podcasting Questions Answered, we were talking about different ways of consuming podcasts, and Sally Getch from podcastasylum.com left this comment. She says, "Thanks for mentioning Miro. I've been using Gpotter, but it's a pain to configure the sync. Miro's beautiful, easy to set up, and best of all, to her at least, it converts video to audio right there inside the program, so I can listen to all those M4V and MP4 files that won't play on my Sansa clip." She asked the question, which is a great question: why don't people realize it's a good idea to release audio-only versions of their talking head video conference recordings? I don't know. It's insane. But speaking of ways to listen to podcasts, if you are a regular listener to the show, you know that I have switched from using my iPod, which required me to synchronize to my computer all the time. I have a Droid phone, and I've been using this thing called BeyondPod. Well, it just got better, because if you can handle spending, it's $7 for the app, and now I spent another $3 for this thing called Presto. And what Presto does is it allows me to change the speed of the podcast. Now, I say this because I just got interviewed about my book, More Podcast Money, on the Mr. Media show. You can find that at mrmedia.com. It hasn't posted my interview yet. I'll let you know when that's there, but that's coming up. And we were talking about a podcast called The Nerdist. I think or Nerdcast. Here we go again. That was half the discussion. I believe it's The Nerdist. Great show prep, Dave. But, and he was saying how it really wasn't that bad of a show. It is. It's Nerdist. Nerdist.com. And it's Chris Hardwick, and it's actually going to end up on the radio. And I said, I've listened to a couple episodes of this, and I just don't get it. The guy never even says what the show's about. It's just him talking with his buddies. And the host said, hey, give it a chance. Well, if you have somebody like that for whatever reason, maybe they're just talking about themselves, maybe they're not getting to the point, for whatever reason, this Presto plugin for the BeyondPod podcatcher, and it might work with other podcatchers on your phone, speeds things up. In fact, you can have it go at an insane amount that you can't even really understand. So let me give you an example of what this sounds like.
Occurred to me last night as far as this, just this little inspired thought. Same thing happened last week when I was watching this with the family, and that is this. I'm sitting there watching these people be coached by these professional artists, and the one thing that every coach has now said during this first season of The Voice in their coaching, and of course, this, I'm a coach myself, and so I see this, and there's something that has been applicable to podcasters if podcasters are watching The Voice, and that is when the coach.
All right, let me remind you that July 11th will be our next free podcasting webinar. If you have any questions, if you just want to come out, it's kind of like a pod camp. We just talk all things podcasting out there and share ideas and bounce ideas off each other and, hey, what gear are you using, that kind of stuff. Go out to schoolofpodcasting.com/webinars. And again, it will be it'll be July 11th, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so our friends on the West Coast can join in. And speaking of friends on the West Coast, I want to talk about I've said in the past that podcasting is going to change the world. Unfortunately, when we say that, we think it's going to somehow lead a revolution, or it's going to cure cancer, it's going to cure AIDS, or it's going to end racism or whatever. And to a certain extent, it may help some of those things. But what I'm talking about, I want to explain something. People always go, why should I start a podcast? I was reading, it's on my blog at davidjackson.org today. There's a nurses podcast that has 15,000 downloads a week because it's tying in all the nurses together. You can find that out at davidjackson.org. But so you can build a community, but you can also just help people. So let me give you an example. I've talked about Dan Class and The Bitterest Pill. You can find it at thebitterestpill.com. He's a stay-at-home dad. He's he calls himself a failed actor. I don't know how he's been in more commercials than I have. He's working on coming back as a stand-up comedian. And he's just had these great stories of raising his two children, which is really weird because when he started his podcast back in 2004, which makes Dan a pioneer, his son was 5 and now his son is 12, which makes even me feel old. But here's the story. It was hot. Now, when I say hot, I need you to understand, I mean hot. Here in Cleveland, Ohio. It was like 97 with like 2,000% humidity. Your sweat was sweating. It was that hot. I was on my way home in my car doing everything you can to make it somehow cool off. You got the air conditioning on, you got the sunroof open, you got all the windows open, and you're still sweating. And I started listening to The Bitterest Pill, and Dan was talking about how he was going to a Prince concert, and he was explaining some things and explained how he, growing up, got introduced to Prince. And more importantly, the first album he listened to by Prince was called Dirty Mind. And here's just a little snippet.
Along with my friend at the time, Terrence Darnell, that I should be educated in the culture that was the African American experience, but not honestly, the African American experience as it was experienced in Fairport High School in the 1980s. Not exactly the inner city of Detroit. I'm talking the African American experience in a middle to upper middle class village along the Erie Canal. Okay. But certainly not white culture. Certainly not the Captain and Tennille and Elton John like I was listening to at home with my mommy and daddy. Okay, Dirty Mind is not exactly Muskrat Love.
Right. I'm sorry, when I hear the phrase Captain and Tennille, I just want to giggle. Okay, and just that line stopped the day. And this is hard to get across, but I was miserable in my car. I was hating the ride home. And all of a sudden, the day wasn't so long. The ride wasn't so bad. It went from being this horrible experience to, you know what? I'm chilling with my friend Dan and he's making me laugh. He's making my day better. And you know what? It wasn't so bad. And he'd do these fun little imitations of Prince, which in my book sounded a little more like Michael Jackson.
But then he starts singing, "There's something about you, baby. Happens all the time. Whenever I'm around you, baby."
But he had changed my day. My day was now better. I'll give you another quick example. I was listening to A1Blues.com with my good friend Mark, alumni of the School of Podcasting. He was interviewing Tommy Castro, and you're like, Tommy who? Tommy Castro is this great guitar player, great just performer. Big fan of Tommy. And Mark was talking to Tommy. How cool was that? But I'd fallen out of the Tommy loop. And there was Mark explaining that Tommy had a new album out, and then he played half the album. So he provided value to me. And I went out and bought the album. So yes, podcasting sells products. And so I always talk about how, your podcast can move people. Well, Mark moved me to go out and spend $9 on a CD download. And Dan moved me to smile. I always tell people, you're going to make people either laugh, cry, think, moan or educate or entertain. If you're not doing one of those, quit podcasting. So, yes, Dan, I know it sounds silly, but I just thought that was really cool. I guess it's hard to explain, and I'll quit beating this point to the ground. I was having a really bad day, and suddenly my day was fun. It wasn't just like, okay, I can talk. It was fun. I was laughing. So I went from to and that's cool. And so if you're a person, see, that's what motivates me. My background is in teaching. I like to help people. When people email me and they call me and say, Dave, hey, thanks for explaining that. It really helped. I understand it now, and I'm moving on. That really scratches my itch. You can scratch other people's itch. Dan likes to make people laugh. So I called him and let him know that, hey, you made me laugh. You made my day. And I'm going to leave with one other point. So a little longer show today. Three points today, one show. Usually it's like one or two. This is the bonus content. Here's the thing. And I don't know why this is, but part of this whole Prince episode, I actually called into the Bitterest Pill. So number one, I urge you to call into any podcast that you listen to, just so the podcasters know that, yeah, the microphone's on, but somebody's actually listening out there. Any podcast you listen to, call in that voicemail number, send them an email, leave a comment on a blog, something to let them know that somebody's listening. And I called into Dan. Now, and shortly thereafter, the episode came out, and my voice that's on this podcast every week was now on one of my favorite podcasts. One of the few podcasts that I started listening to in 2004, and I'm still listening to 7 years later. My voice was coming out of my favorite podcast, and you know what? I just got downright giddy. I was like, hey, I'm on the Bitterest Pill. Now, what's interesting about this, and I don't mean any disrespect to Dan, this should not be a big deal. You see, at the very first two podcasting expos, I met and hung out with Dan Class. I've met Dan, I've shook his hand, I've hung out, we kind of talked around a pool one night, and he's a great guy. So the fact that, and I've exchanged emails, this should not be a big deal that my voice is on the Bitterest Pill. But here's the cool thing. It was a big deal to me. I don't know why, but it is. So I say that to say, when you get any kind of feedback, guard that stuff like it's gold, like your life depends on it, because when that makes it into your podcast, we don't know why. Because I know it's just you and it's just me down here in the basement, but it's cool when somebody hears their voice coming out of your podcast. That's going to do it for today. There you go. What did we learn today? Well, we learned that there's a fun way to play podcasts that make people sound kind of silly. We learned that when you start a podcast, that little microphone can actually change people's lives for the better. And we learned that for whatever reason, number one, call into somebody's podcast this week. And number two, you'll be amazed at how giddy you feel when you hear your voice coming out of your favorite podcast. Thanks for listening. Speaking of starting a podcast, this is where the plug comes in. We'll make it quick. I've got step-by-step tutorials. By that, I mean step-by-step. Like, here's where you start. Then you do this. Then you do that. Then you do this. Then you do that. And in the end, you know what you have? You have a podcast. Now, if you get stuck anywhere along the way, which you're not, but if you do, I'm right there, your personal podcast coach, to help you along the way, answer your questions. You need some resources, want some music for your podcast, things like that. That's all out there as well. Check it out. schoolofpodcasting.com. You can sign up for a week, you can sign up for a month, you can sign up for a year, anything you want. Check it out, schoolofpodcasting.com. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you again real soon. If you'd like to contact me one last time, dave@schoolofpodcasting.com is my email. My phone number is 888-563-3228. And our website is schoolofpodcasting.com. Everything I talked about you can find at shownotes.schoolofpodcasting.com. Thanks so much for listening. And until next week, class is dismissed.